Poverty, a presentation by Adriana Perales, Beth Reutz, Gabriela Massini, Griselda Maria Palma, and Julie Reed. Poverty is multidimensional and includes food insecurity, poor housing, unemployment, psychological distress, powerlessness, hopelessness, vulnerability, and lack of access to healthcare, education, and transportation. Some key terms to poverty are absolute poverty. This is defined as the lack of resources necessary for well-being. Some examples are food, water, housing, sanitation, and healthcare. Another term is relative poverty, the lack of material and economic resources compared with some other population. Poverty is usually measured by Human Poverty Index. This is defined as deprivation of a long, healthy life, deprivation of knowledge, deprivation in decent living standards.
The rich and the poor. There are two ways of measuring the extent of economic inequality: income and wealth. Income refers to the amount of money a person makes in a given period. Wealth refers to a person's total assets. This includes real estate holdings, cash, stocks, bonds, and other things. The United States is characterized by social stratification. It has social classes, and the upper class has the greatest access to the pleasures that money can buy. This disparity between the very rich and the very poor are constantly on the increase. In the United States, the wealthiest 1% of all households hold more than 1/3 of all personal wealth. Personal wealth can be defined by someone's net worth. Net worth is the value of all assets minus debts. The wealthiest 20% of households in the United States receive almost 50% of all income, and the poorest 20% receive less than 5% of all income. The problem is the poverty line, the level of income that the federal government considers sufficient to meet basic requirements of food, shelter, and clothing. In 2011, the Census Bureau reported that 46.2 million people lived below the poverty line, which is 2.6 million more than the year before. What the poor face. The poor face poor diet and nutrition. The cheapest foods are the least healthiest. Things such as canned beans, macaroni and cheese, ramen noodles, and boxed dinners. The poor also face a destitute living condition. This includes rodent infestations, the lack of running water and heating, and hazardous housing. Appearance. The poor often appear to be ragged, have poor quality clothing, and unfit clothing. Lack of opportunity for advancement, socially, economically, or educationally. The poor also face poor health. They have little access to health care and lower quality health care when accessible.
Who are the poor? Poverty is concentrated among certain population categories, including one-parent families, children, older adults, large-sized families, people of color, and the homeless. The poor are a marginalized group. Marginalized groups are relatively powerless people who, because they belong to a certain socioeconomic class, age cohort, labor organization, political affiliation, gender, racial or ethnic group, or religious group, are seen as being of little importance by the dominant culture group. Who are the poor? This is a difference from 2009-2010, according to the Census Bureau survey from 2010. With race, whites are the smallest group in poverty, with the largest increase in numbers, as it increased by 1.1 million people. With blacks and Hispanics, the number in poverty increased by 0.8 million people. With Asians, it was consistent from previous years. In age, under 18, the numbers increased 0.9 million. From ages 18 to 64, the numbers increased 1.6 million. From 65 years and older, it was consistent from previous years. Nativity. Native-born populations increased 2.2 million, while foreign-born populations increased 0.4 million. Who are the poor continued? Within region, the South had their highest regional poverty rate. Populations increased 1.5 million. With residents, the urban poor received 2.6 million increase. The rural poor had no significant difference. In family dynamics, married couples had a 0.2 increase in populations. female householder had a 0.3 increase in populations. Male householder had no significant increase.
What causes poverty? A few causes are unemployment, poor physical health, low education level, emotional problems, drug addiction, racial and sexual discrimination, budgeting problems, mismanagement of resources, mental retardation, and many more. From this list, we can see poverty has many causes. Eliminating the causes of poverty would create more social problems. Poverty interacts with almost all social problems. The culture of poverty arises after extended periods of economic deprivation in highly stratified capitalistic societies. Deprivation is caused by high rates of unemployment and low wages for those who are employed. This leads to attitudes and values of helplessness and despair. The culture continues to exist because attitudes and norms and expectations of the poor limit opportunities. They are socially isolated with little contact with groups outside of their own culture. Finally, they become hostile to institutions, social and educational, that may be able to help them escape poverty.
Poverty is functional. They are available to do unpleasant jobs that no one else wants to do. By their activities, they subsidize the more affluent. Jobs are established for those people, such as social workers, who provide services to the poor. The poor purchase goods, such as those of poor quality, that otherwise could not be sold. They serve as examples of deviance that are frowned on by the majority and that thereby support dominant norms. They provide an opportunity for others to practice their Christian duty of helping the less fortunate. They make mobility more likely for others because they are removed from the competition for a good education and a good job. They contribute to culture activities by providing, for example, cheap labor for the construction of monuments and work of art. They create cultural forms that are often adopted by the affluent. They serve as symbolic opponents for some political groups and as constituents for others. They often absorb the cost of change, for example, by being the victim of unemployment that results from technological advances.
Theories that can be applied to poverty. Conflict theory. It assumes that because there is such an enormous wealth in modern societies, no one in such societies should go without their needs being met. It also believes that the working poor are being exploited, being paid poverty-level wages so that their employers can reap higher profit. It also asserts that poverty does not exist because it is essential for society to function, only because some groups benefit from the poverty of others. Finally, it believes that poverty can be best dealt with by the poor becoming politically aware and organizing to reduce inequality through government action. The next theory is interactionist theory. It sees poverty as being relative because it depends on what you compare it to. It asserts that poverty is not a matter of economic deprivation, but involves the person's self-concept. It believes that poverty can be resolved by eliminating the stigma associated with poverty. Poverty can be eliminated by improved public assistance programs that bring the poor up to an adequate standard of living, combining with programs that provide opportunities to move up the socioeconomic ladder, and programs that encourage the poor to redefine their social environment.